David just briefly introduced myself, I'm one of the two co-chairs that run and chair these mobile special interest group events. We put on our events on average every other month, bi-monthly basis. Our previous, up to this day, over the past year, for example, we've put on events around mobile OS platforms, this year and going forward. We've put on events like mobile app stores phenomenon, also cross platform development tools as one recent topic that we put on a very interesting panel event around. And going forward, we also, as David briefly hinted, we work closely with other SIGs like location-based services SIG to put on joint events that will be coming up shortly. We'll, towards the end, share with you a couple of immediately coming up events towards the end. Early next year, we'll also be highlighting some events around mobile security as well as mobile entertainment solutions, enterprise-based mobile solutions. With that, I'd like to, and personally for me, it's a very important SIG involvement for myself because I've always been in wireless and mobile industry all my 15 years of career across Samsung, IBM's wireless semiconductor business, as well as heavily being involved with Android with a company called Windows Systems. Now with that, I would like to introduce quickly our moderator for tonight. Ms. Avril is a very renowned and has extensive experience, 20+ years of experience in wireless and computing industries. She's held various very high-profile executive and technical positions from small startups to major corporations, including IBM, Intel, Microsoft, Motorola, and Sprint. And she is our moderator for tonight. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over this event over to our moderator, Avril.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tristan. So welcome. Thank you for coming out in the evening to see us and spend some time with us. So we've really got a really interesting panels set up for you, just a tremendous diverse group, and a panel with a lot of expertise. So, and we're going to allow a lot of time for your questions as well. So what I've done for you today, which I thought would be really fun, would be start off with just a couple of teasers, look at the market, what's out there, just kind of get the flow going in terms of what you might be thinking about, what is the mobile cloud industry, kind of spice the panel a little bit with some numbers maybe. And then what I wanted to do was to ask the panel actually to tell us what is their view of what is the mobile cloud. What is that? And what you're going to find, I think it's really fun, when I saw the slides, and they haven't seen each other's slides. I kept them in the dark. But we've got a wonderful set of slides and a tremendous amount of diversity in those slides. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see their perspective on the mobile cloud. And what I've also asked them to do is to talk a little bit about not only what is the mobile cloud, but how do they fit in the mobile cloud? And that will really help you say, what is the type of questions that I can ask this person? Right? It also saves me a lot of work, but that way I don't have to tell you all about how wonderful they are. Right? So really take a look at what they're saying, what their messages are. So we're going to start with that and really give them some time to say what is the mobile cloud. After that, I'm going to throw some questions at them, and then we're going to take a short break, and then it's really up for you to then come back and ask them some questions. So please, think of some really meaty questions, because you've got a really tremendous set of panelists here. And if you didn't pick up the flyer with everybody's name on it, do that in the break as well. So let me start with a couple of numbers, just some fun numbers for you. This one's from Cisco. Right? And again, Cisco's an interesting company because they've been working very much on the on the enterprise side and moving into the telecom space quite aggressively. And what really amazes me about this slide when I look at it is the video traffic. And video traffic is just growing like crazy. It's not only people like us that upload their short videos, it's people like that are using security at their homes to monitor their homes. You've got the potential video going down to cars and things like that now. So just a phenomenal amount of video traffic. In fact, I was at an enterprise a little while ago where they're actually deprioritizing their video traffic because it's interfering with their business traffic in the corporate life. So just phenomenal change in traffic, and just, this is being generated from mobile devices, from you and I and all the devices in our cars and everything. So what does that mean to the mobile cloud? That's a great question, right, with that traffic. The other one, of course, we all know what's happening in the application download world, right? We've all got those phones, we've all been madly downloading those applications, and it's just been hugely exciting. But when we look at the revenue from that, a lot of those applications are free, right? And there are some people making money from it, but a lot of it's really like mum and pups that really got in there. You know, my son has he has a cute app that exposes this woman in a bikini as the battery runs down. So you want to expose the battery, right? And he's had thousands of downloads from it. You know, it's a really cute app. So there's a lot of stuff up there, and a lot of it's a great deal of fun. And the question is, how do we generate revenue, and how does the cloud change that model? You know, with these apps, well, now we've got the cloud, how do these apps that's downloaded and now the cloud model, how does that work together? And this is a great set of questions for this panel, because this is the world that they live in and they struggle with and have a perspective of. So we're going to talk about that as well. Right. And the last one I wanted to share with you here was just, you know, to pad it a little bit, and, you know, is that the projection for the amount of money that's coming in from the cloud is also looking phenomenally strong. And you know, there's some reports out from IBM that says most of the application development going forward is actually going to be in the mobile cloud. That's where application developers are going to start targeting. And so the question is, we've got huge explosion in the download of the apps, huge potential in the cloud. What does that world look like? And in fact, what is the mobile cloud? So at that point in time, I'm going to hand it over to my panelists, right? And the way I did this was the person who sent me the slide first gets to present first, right? So, you know, you're going to find out who was last. Very late, I should tell you, right? Yeah, looking rather embarrassed at this point. And also, you're going to see the person who, when I instructed one slide, said 2 slides. Yeah? So we're going to hear the ones that follow instructions, but let me hand it over then to the panel. And again, what I'm asking them to do is to define the mobile cloud and then help us understand their role so we can target our questions for them. Okay. First one. Amy.
I cannot believe I was first. None of my mic's on.
Startup. Energy. Oh.
In any case, I can probably speak loudly enough, but I really can't believe I was first. I think you had to remind me twice, and I was sure I was last or second last. Anyway, so I'm a senior director of business development at Box.net. How many of you are familiar with Box and what we do? Good. Okay, a few of you. For those who don't know, we are cloud content management. What this means is a company, and to be clear, we're enterprise focused, so we're not focused on the individual so much as on businesses. They store their content on our servers, which then allows them to access it from any device, any PC, mobile devices, wherever they are, and easily share with their colleagues, both inside and share with people outside of their organization, as you can see in this diagram. When I think about the mobile cloud, first of all, from Box's perspective, there's not a big difference really between the cloud and the mobile cloud. You know, we are a cloud service, and so everything we do is cloud. I don't really distinguish between those two. But what I will say is unique about the concept of a mobile cloud for us is how much mobility has been a driver of the cloud. So when you're on a PC, it may be okay to have your content stored locally on that device. As soon as your organization outfits people with tablets and smartphones, and you have this proliferation and plethora of devices, it becomes incredibly important that your content be stored in the cloud so that it's accessible by everybody. And that's what we've seen at Box, and it's been a driver of tremendous growth for us in the past year.
That's great. Thank you, Jamie.
Sure.
So,
Hi, everybody. I'm Priya, Abani. Let me start off by telling I can't believe I was second. And I can't believe I was the only one who sent 2 foils. So, what's wrong with this girl? But anyway. So, when she sent the question, I was like, I have to put the first foil I made when I rejoined Intel 2.5 years back. coming from the mobile world of working with operators and doing ISV enabling, the first day my boss said, "Can you make a foil on cloud computing?" And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, you figure it out." So literally this is the foil I made, because my instant reaction was to go to Wikipedia and say, what is cloud computing? And it came out with multiple definitions, right? Which I think every person in this room, if we ask you the question of what is cloud computing, you're all going to have a different definition, which hopefully will all come back together at some holistic definition. But the bottom line is we're going to look at 2.5 billion consumers in 5 years connecting to about 10 billion devices, which means crazy amounts of increase in storage, network, infrastructure, and compute, right? We're talking about like 1 billion virtual servers, new virtual servers to be made in the next 2 to 3 years. And obviously coming from Intel, that's core business for us, something we're very interested in looking at. And I'm not going to ask the question, do you guys know what Intel does? Because I'm assuming you all know what Intel does. It's funny to, you realize you're getting old because you start saying things like back in the days. So back in the days when I was in school and I started my job, you heard about client server and peer-to-peer and utility-based and all of that, and obviously cloud computing derives those characteristics very strongly from all of those terms. Sorry.
To slide 2.
To slide 2, there you go. Hey, wasn't that a definition for all of you?
We may not agree.
So the 3 tenets of cloud, as far as how Intel looks at it, are the cloud is federated, which is pretty much a prerequisite for manageability of the cloud. The cloud is automated, which means that you can, it delivers a promise of elasticity as it's supposed to do. And the third one, which specifically I have been working on for the last 2 years, is the cloud is client aware, which basically means that do not dumb down the client, whether it's a handheld or a tablet or a PC. If the cloud understands the capabilities of the client, it can make more intelligent decisions of delivery based on the context, the security, the compute, all of these characteristics of the client. So it's not necessarily that we're saying a PC is better than hand. No, just understand what type of client is using it, have a balanced approach, and that's something that we've been working with a lot of companies for.
Thank you. Hugh.
I'm Hugh Fletcher. I lead the network API projects at Verizon Wireless. We have a new facility up in San Francisco for developer support. Spent a couple days up there a week and a couple days out in Walnut Creek. And I know some of you all saw Ted do some demonstrations. So you have sort of our view of cloud. But in a general sense, we've got all these things. We bought Terramark, last year or something for about $5 or $6 billion or something. So we've got this nice big cloud company, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So you've got infrastructure as a service, you've got SaaS as a service, you've got anything now as a service, because Amazon really led the way, and it's fun. My son does startups here in the Valley, and they started out, they were, it was Microsoft, then it was Lamps architecture, but now all the startups are all Amazon based or Roku based, and so they don't buy servers anymore. So that's happened in a very short period of time. So that's been a lot of fun to watch. But some of the characteristics that I think kind of define clouds, and I agree, there's not a lot of difference between mobile cloud and regular cloud, because if it's not mobile, it's not meaningful now. That's a Verizon perspective, but in general, I think that it's almost true without being too facetious. But no upfront capital. You should be able to be up and going, just like on Amazon Web Services, with no capital. Pay for only what you use. So the elasticity that Priya said is you're using 4 dynos or whatever Roku calls. You pay for 4.
Is this so you can show off the new phone? He's going to do a Verizon Wireless plug. Verizon Wireless coverage.
Normally I do say, if you're a Verizon Wireless subscriber, first of all, thank you very much. And if you get a phone call, please answer it, because that's a nickel. So thank you very much. Pay for only what you use. And it should have some APIs. So let me go to that. This is really about platforms and programmable platforms. was talking to Irfan today at Juniper. Juniper has a network platform. And so you start thinking about what can you do with all the Juniper infrastructure and Verizon and make those things programmatically available to third parties. So I think that's another key feature. The mobile cloud starts with voice calls. So Verizon, in some respects, as a platform, just as a company, is a mobile cloud, and you should be able to actually make a phone call, to send text messages, some of the things that we do day in and day out. But services like Dropbox, services like Box, these are important extensions to our day-to-day life that I think have those characteristics.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to say I'm not last. So my name is Samir Kumar. I'm the Director of Business Development for Samsung. I look after working with North American-based companies to find ways to differentiate Samsung's mobile business. So our line of handsets and tablets by bringing in innovation from the outside and creating differentiated experience on the device. So as a result, we absolutely are very, very interested in figuring out how the mobile cloud could be a differentiator and working with companies like Box to see how we could, take their proposition, integrate it on our devices, and offer it to our customers in a way that will provide a differentiated experience. Now, when we think about the mobile cloud, again, all three of these, I agree with all of my co-panelists. They apply equally to cloud computing, whether you're doing it on the desktop or on your laptop, in addition to mobile. But these three, I want to call out because without them, you would be severely hampered in terms of what you can do on your mobile device. So the first one, the notion of anywhere access, that's a concept that's been around for quite some time. So anytime, anywhere access becomes especially relevant when you have data that's on your phone, on your tablet, on your PC at home, and now also imagine other types of consumer electronics devices where you may want to access that data. So being able to get to your data and maybe even your applications regardless of the endpoint or the client device that you're using. Secondly, the notion of having tremendous and potentially unlimited compute power in the cloud and using your mobile device as a sensor. So you're taking photos, you're tracking location, you're able to collect all sorts of data on the device, but you don't necessarily have to process that data on the device. You can move the processing to the cloud and take advantage of the tremendous amount of computing power that's available. And assuming we have great networks like the Verizon 4G LTE network, I can then very quickly bring the results from that computation back to the device to be able to do something interesting for the end user. And then last but certainly not least, the cloud and mobile cloud are going to revolutionize enterprise mobility. If we think about some of the traditional challenges around how do I get back to that server that's behind my firewall? How do I authenticate and poke a hole through my network to be able to get to that data that I need to do my job? By moving enterprise applications and data to the cloud, we make it very possible now to get to that data from anywhere and not have to worry about things like VPNs, not have to worry about, hey, does that operator have that particular port open that would allow me to get to my enterprise network? So we think that having enterprise data in the cloud will allow, first of all, people to use the same device for work and for personal use and not be restricted in terms of what kind of data and what kind of applications I can now do on my mobile device when I'm looking at doing work or business scenarios. Now at the bottom, there are some risks associated with moving to both mobile cloud and cloud computing. Certainly the consistency of bandwidth availability. Here I'm relying on the availability of, say, Verizon's 4G LTE network, but tomorrow I could be traveling somewhere outside of the United States where 3G is not even available. How do I design applications and user experiences that can account for it's not always going to be the latest and greatest at all times? And also thinking about uptime and availability. We've seen examples in the past where Amazon's S3 cloud went down. Other cloud platform vendors have had to deal with downtime issues. So we have to think about SLAs, service level agreements, where people can run their business on the cloud, and especially mobile applications. But we also have to take into account that it's not always going to be there without any question.
Great, thank you. So Karun, you're next, and I'm just going to make sure your mic's turned on.
Okay, I think it's okay. So I work for a small startup that's 36 years old. It's called Microsoft. And I work for the emerging business team there that is chartered with finding and supporting great startups. So the program is called BizSpark 1. In that program, we focus on different technology segments. One of them is cloud and infrastructure, and I manage that portfolio. In my role, I get to see a lot of startups. They tend to be generally venture-backed and very strong alignment with Microsoft and very talented teams and really good products. But I would agree with a lot of, I guess moving on to beyond my role and looking at what the mobile cloud is and what mobile cloud computing is, I would generally define mobile cloud computing, and I'm doing this from memory since I can't look back, which is it's the collection of devices, the collection of services, and sort of the entire value chain of building applications and deploying them, making them accessible to people on mobile devices. Specifically focusing on the mobile cloud itself, I would agree with a lot of my panelists that the notion of a mobile cloud is really a misnomer. There's just a cloud, and whether the delivery mechanism is a mobile device or not is really irrelevant to that aspect. And so the way I've sort of defined it is there's a magnifying glass on the cloud, and if you look closely, there's services that maybe are consumed by mobile devices. They could be generally applications or application services, location-based services, device management, synchronization facilities, things like that. But there's no difference between them and any of the other services that might be accessible through the cloud. And what I've done is also try to show a little bit about the value chain where you've got developers building applications, deploying them to the cloud, whether they be applications or actually services and platforms to the cloud that can be accessed by other developers, and then those being accessible by devices. And I guess the main takeaway there is that I think going forward, I think a lot of people have been focusing a lot on the cloud and devices and building applications, but maybe it behooves us to think about a little bit about the entire value chain, about where the applications reside, what the delivery mechanisms are, and what the tooling is available to build and deploy the services. And I think Microsoft seems to have a comprehensive set around that. So,
Great.
thanks.
And lastly,
All right, I'm last. So I'm going to start with a little interesting anecdote. So last week I was at a financial services industry conference. There were 7,000 bankers running around, and a handful of them talking about cloud computing. And one of the answers, again, panel defined cloud computing. One of the answers was mainframe based on software, which I thought was really interesting. It was an interesting answer if you think about dynamic scale, growing your business, right, having the compute capacity. So that was a really interesting answer. I think the answer also varies depending upon who you talk to, right? I've kind of referenced it as the connected cloud instead of the mobile cloud, because really it's about being connected remotely, whether it's device to device or machine to machine, cloud device to device, machine to machine, or whether it's your mobile device, or whether it's to a browser, whatever it might be. So I call it the connected cloud. But it also depends upon if you're talking to people in emerging markets. So you mentioned you don't know what your platform's going to be. Are you running on LTE, 4G, or are you 3G, 2G? What country are you in? In emerging markets, when you talk to service providers in Africa or in South America, they will tell you that the mobile cloud for them is a dumb device with all the applications running in the cloud. So can you just build a base dumb device and have everything set in the cloud? Because you know what? They've got no historical network, so they're running all 4G. So they can actually rely on constant availability and bandwidth. So it really varies depending on who you talk to and where you are. When we look at the connected cloud and within Alcatel-Lucent, as you had on his chart, right, there's kind of the stack, right? So there's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and application as a service. This diagram kind of maps out all of those things, but says there's a set of services that you need within that. So, infrastructure as a service, whether it's public, private, or hybrid cloud, right? You need to manage the cloud and the cloud services. You have basically a bus that's actually going to coordinate services either across clouds, because in many cases you may want to use multiple clouds. This is the new thing. I have different SLAs that I need for different applications, so I'm going to run them across different cloud services, and I want to do that dynamically, especially in an enterprise. And then you actually have the different service types. So you might have information services, which are data-based APIs, or you might have access services, which are things like security APIs, or maybe even business app services or applications. Access services might be things like OAuth, right? So there's all these different services. So you have the infrastructure, you have the management of that infrastructure, You have the services and the coordination or orchestration of those. And then above that, the value that you get out of a cloud that people didn't really look at in mainframe was all the analytics, all the business data, all the value that comes out of that having that cloud-based infrastructure, whether it's just you and having your data centralized and having that information centralized, or whether it's you and others as part of an ecosystem having that data. So I think I look at connected cloud as being sort of the whole stack and a bit bigger. But I took the architecture diagram, so sorry, it's the Alcatel-Lucent thing. So at Alcatel-Lucent, I run a group called the Application Enablement Group, and we do everything from go-to-market to build products for everything from platform as a service, so middleware so you can expose APIs, all the way through client tools, so you can do write once, deploy across multiple devices or operating systems, to things like programmable web. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of things, but all related to APIs and infrastructure.
That's great, thank you. So let me ask the audience, how many people here feel that they've got a consistent answer to what the mobile cloud is? Anybody? Ooh. Okay, so just continue to continue that theme. I really want to sort of explore this a little bit more, because this is a very new market, right? The reason why there is a variance is because we're in a new space. This is an incredibly exciting space. So Hugh said to me, hey, Avril, you should do some quick questions and see what the panelists are thinking. So I'm going to do that. I thought it was a great suggestion. So my question, based on Hugh, so everybody's going to kill Hugh for this. But out of the panel, I want to ask you, where's the market going to take off? Is it going to take off in the consumer space or the enterprise space? How would you like to vote? Which of the panelists would want to say the consumer space is going to go first, where the revenue is going to be? Oh, we have some consistency. No one on the enterprise side. Interesting. And also when you look at these different models, and you look at where that revenue is going to come from, it's going to come from consumer. Is it going to come, is the revenue going to stay with the download of applications where you buy it once and use it, or is it going to come to that utility model and that cloud base? So who's going to vote for the cloud base? Consumers going to pay that monthly fee? And who thinks it's still going to be the download and the apps and the devices that's going to take off? Okay, so you're not answering me.
Yeah, I was thinking
So,
actually it's going too fast. I think the format too.
oh, speak in the mic so we can hear you, please.
It was a 1 or 2, right? It's number 1.
It's number 1. Laura.
A little bit of devil's advocate, but it's going to be the services that are offered as part of the cloud, not just creation and instantiation of data and storage, but it's going to be all the other services that surround it beyond data and beyond storage, for instance, creation.
Yeah.
So all APIs.
That's all APIs.
I mean, what just happened to Apple to download the freemium thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, just overnight, the market turned to freemium, and with
give people a bit of background. They may not know what you're talking about here.
so I'm not. Does somebody have like the real numbers on this?
I don't
So
know.
where the Apple downloads, the Android downloads went from paid downloads to free downloads with the upsell inside the app.
Yeah, it's like 70%.
In-app bill.
In-app purchase moved to be like 70% of the total revenue.
Just-
It was like 70% overnight.
Just overnight, the revenue for downloads disappeared and it all went to freemium. And so in-app billing, and I think all the operators are working on in-app billing in one way or another now. And so to the extent that you can have carrier billing with this stuff, I think it's really changed that dynamic. And developers now have direct access to upsell to their customers without sharing with anybody.
Yeah. So
This isn't Q&A time.
you have to wait till after the break.
We get this in the week.
But we're going to give you 20 to 30 minutes, so there's plenty of time. So let's take this a little bit further. Let's talk about what some of the new usage models are that are starting to emerge that's kind of like really going to take the cloud beyond the storage. Who on the panel has some view on what the next thing is? Maybe Jamie, maybe from your side you have some thoughts there.
Take the cloud beyond the storage. I mean, Box, for those of you who don't know, this year we changed our business model to a degree. We've never really considered that we sold storage. We sell a collaboration platform, but we changed our enterprise plans to include unlimited storage. So you pay $35 per user per month, and you have unlimited storage. So that's, from our perspective, storage is a commodity. It's falling fast to zero, as it should. It's not an interesting business, but selling collaboration is incredibly interesting to us.
So, Samir, do you have anything from Samsung's perspective on that one?
Yeah, so I would say, if you think about Samsung, we're in the business of selling hardware. We sell devices, we sell consumer electronics. The way we think about the cloud at this stage is not necessarily we're going to switch to monetizing the cloud and selling services to our users. We really have to look at how do we maintain the differentiation of our devices, where cloud services are bundled or included as part of the proposition so that we can maintain the price at which we sell our devices. Now, certainly, as we look at what our users are asking for, if there is an opportunity for a monetizable service, we will look at that. But for the time being, our business is to continue to sell our devices and look at the associated services as a way of continuing to differentiate those devices in the market.
And Priya, you wanted to say something on that one as well?
Yeah, so what do you think is important in the mobile cloud, right? It's not like how much it costs to buy your spectrum or how complicated your devices are. It's actually finding new applications for users to solve problems that they did not even know they had, right? So you're talking about music players, you're talking about gaming, these are all the traditional stuff. But look at some of the apps that are coming out on Android and iPhone today. Seriously, there's apps for everything. There's apps to time your nanny. There are apps to have a remote camera to look into your kid's daycare. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening. So I think it's really imagination of where these apps are going to go and how many people are going to download it.
Right.
But the traditional segments are all going to remain, and the best ones will win for sure.
Okay. So let's we talked about the usage side. Let's talk about the development side. We've seen tremendous growth in application development on the download side, on the device side. What's going to happen here going forward? So, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So I completely agree with Laura. I think it's going to be about services and APIs. I think most of the applications will be composite applications, where people develop applications that somebody else has developed a service that they can consume, and a single application will maybe consume 5 different services running in the cloud. And I think, and I think somebody else also mentioned something about clouds being federated. I think that's also true, that you will have an application that may be accessing 5 different clouds to give you the one application that does the one thing that you want it to do, because the underlying services are just deployed heterogeneously.
Yeah, awesome. So Laura, I see you look like you want to jump in on that one. I know this is your space.
Just along those lines, we were talking earlier about service composition. So I think mobile app development, right, is going to change, but it will take time. Again, it goes back to what you put as one of the glitches. You don't know what your network is going to be, and until service providers offer you the ability to know what network you're on so you can switch context. If you build an app based on assuming you have an LTE network and you end up switching to a 3G network, and instead you were streaming when you should have maybe downloaded whatever it was that you were watching or doing.
Why would you want to switch to a 3G network?
We might randomly still have infrastructure up that's a bit older.
You're in the developing world.
Right, so there are things that need to happen in order to let you know what you're on and what you're using and what volume is and how you take advantage of that. And I think the other part about it is also thinking about what it means to be, mobile app development. A lot more is going to be machine to machine, right? So when I look at, ages ago, sold Netflix their API infrastructure, and their infrastructure today, most of the volume from the Netflix, they claim 10 billion API calls a month, right? Well, at least that was a few months back. That actually comes from machine to machine. That's not things that are happening on somebody picking up, this necessarily. It's you actually watching, streaming a video to your, your box, right, to your Xbox or whatever it might be that you have as your game station. So it's really, to me, the mobile app development really is going to change how you build stuff, where you build it. Talked about federated clouds and SLAs. I mean, that's one of the challenges is going to be how you actually monetize or how people charge for where things live. So if you have an app that crosses 3 different cloud instances, you have to now track the monetization and instantiation across those 3 clouds. Completely changes the business model and completely changes how you are going to monetize your app or how a developer is going to monetize it or how you as the business owner are going to expose that service. Right, so I think there's a lot of things that make app development more complex as we look towards mobile. I think you think mobile cloud, I think you think it's simpler, but I think it's actually making it more complex.
More complex.
Yeah.
So you bring it right into the next subject really, which is, who's going to make money on this, right? So I'm going to ask you, we've been talking about, the carrier's been trying not to be a pipe for years. Their biggest fear is, I don't want to be a pipe. Yet the cloud services can be anybody, right? Anybody can provide a cloud services and potentially want to go across multiple cloud services. So where is the revenue coming from? Hugh, do you want us to kick that one off? Who's going to make money on this?
100 million lines at $55 a month. Something like that. Now, we all have platforms. So I think that's one of the kind of the things here, is we all are platforms now. And so we have a platform. There's a limited number of developers in the world, and so we're all kind of competing for the hearts and minds of these developers. And right now, the hearts and minds of all those developers are with iOS and Android. So I, for one, can't wait for Apple's cloud to come out, because then that will actually teach developers that there's all these other cloud APIs out there. We've got this great little API, or this great little application called Foursquare, F-A-U-X Square. And it uses our location stuff that you saw out there. And when you break a geofence, it does an auto check-in to a Starbucks or something in that. So you never have to bring a full app and do that. Does the auto check-in, then sends out Twitter feeds of where you are and where you checked in. So a very nice mashup of a bunch of things. And so since it's all GET, POST, REST, and JSON, and it's all very easy to do now, and I think Apple will once again lead the way for the developers to start incorporating cloud services to that. So, but one of the things we all have to do is to make sure that we only offer services that are defensible from our platforms.
Right.
So for instance, it would make sense for Verizon to offer a points of interest API. Google can do that for free. Now I could offer APIs for network quality of service. If you have a bad connection, hit the turbo button, and for a fee, I will give you accelerated packets. I can tell you if a user has an unlimited data plan, what their billing address is, lots of what their phone stuff is. So the operator has a lot of information, and which is all very defensible and unique. And I think all of us have to really get to the point where our platforms are offering unique services that are defensible from what we do.
Yeah.
So to add to that, as an OEM, it's a similar challenge. So we work with Microsoft on Windows Phone, we do Android, we have our own platform, Bada. And so when we think about mobile application development, we certainly want Microsoft and Google to advance the capabilities for developers, but we also have to think about how we add value on top. It won't make sense for us to go reinvent and do something that's exclusive to Samsung, but the feature set or the capability is pretty much what you get on Android from Google. But we also have to figure out then how do we take what Google's doing and what Microsoft is doing and provide some unique value on top where there's something differentiated for the ecosystem of Samsung devices that you would benefit both as an end user and also as a developer to actually build that capability.
Yeah, very beautiful bright screens on
I think I would add to that, one thing that maybe we're focusing too much on the platforms themselves. I think one thing to keep in mind is also that some of the players here have channel power, which means they just control the end user. They're the ones who get to touch the end user, and some of us don't. Microsoft doesn't, at least not with this cloud by itself. So people like network operators can partner with apps developers to maybe do a revenue share, or even hardware makers. So it's about the last mile. It's about who controls the end user, the consumer.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jamie, I'm going to ask you to actually pick a response onto this next question, because it'll be interesting to see your perspective, given where you are. When we look at the industry and we say, what are the things that you need to have happen? What do you need the technology vendors to deliver to you, that you can really roll out something great. What is that? What are you missing? What would you like in your portfolio, you think, to take you to the next step?
I mean, from a, this is probably at odds with almost everyone else on this panel, is the proliferation, sorry, the proliferation of platforms for us is the problem, right? We have, in our case, we have iOS phone and tablet apps, we have Android phone and tablet apps, we have a playbook app, a touchpad app, and then we have an m.box.net HTML5 enabled mobile website to handle everyone else.
That's it.
To be honest, so I run mobile business development. I can't even keep the feature straight myself across the different platforms. When someone asks me, does the playbook do this? I don't know. I can't remember. So imagine developing for all those platforms. So, from Box's perspective, I think a standard, whether it be HTML5 or whatever it is that allows us to build one mobile experience and focus on making that a great experience would be fabulous. But there are other forces at play here.
And to add to that, so from an OEM's perspective, and an OEM that supports multiple platforms, we too have to think about what is the portfolio of applications and compelling experiences looks like on Android versus Windows Phone or on Bada. So we definitely have an interest where HTML5 and web-based applications become richer, and the gap between native apps and web apps gets smaller and smaller, and the need to do native application development perhaps becomes a smaller surface area. But we also have an interest in to make sure that those web-based applications can take advantage of the local hardware, whether it's that ultra-fast graphics chip or that great camera or that gyroscope, so that the end user is not the one who has to compromise on what they were getting from that native app versus what they're going to get in that web or HTML5 application.
Let me just add, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to add one more point, which is that you guys bring up a good point, which is this fragmentation that's happening in terms of application development for different devices and OSs. And what you'll see, and actually I'm already seeing this, is that there's companies that will provide you the potential to write once and run anywhere. So I'm actually we're actually bringing in a company in my portfolio that will do that for gaming. It's a company out of Germany called MobileBits that will let you build games using .NET, but then deploy to iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And so you'll see more and more of that happening, so hopefully your lives will be easier.
Laura, you want to go back to that?
Yeah, I think one of the other barriers to mobile cloud computing is going to be, and I hate to bring this up, but it's going to be monetization, right? So today we went from app downloads and making money off of that, to making money off of in-app purchases, to people adjusting business models. I think the business models are still panning out, and it's going to take some time for some of the larger companies to adapt to some of it. So we've even been watching, there's a service provider that wants to take and wholesale traditional services to non-subscribers, right? And so when you think about selling a service to a non-subscriber, the way you do it is going to be a little different. The way you monetize it's going to be a little different, right? I'm not selling you a monthly plan. Now I'm going to try and monetize a single transaction or instance of a video call, right? So the whole business model, John Musser from Programmable Web has this chart that shows 5 years ago, there were about 10 business models for APIs. Right now, there's about 42 business models for APIs. So I think it's going to pan out, and I think part of that's going to also, it's not going to be a barrier, but it's going to be something that will take time to adjust and figure out how they monetize it.
Yeah, I think so. So I might ask you then, if we want to continue the barrier discussion, Priya, when you look at, because I know you're running a lab, when you look at going forward, what are some of the big challenges from a technology perspective that we're going to face that's really going to enable this new future for us?
So I just wanted to make a comment on the previous question. We're trying not to fragment. You can buy our chips for all different factors. So just want to make sure I get there and there. But as far as challenges go, right, there's challenge in obviously software, as we just discussed. There's challenge in getting the device capabilities, right? There's challenge in just the mechanism of delivery, so maybe the network. So I I respect what you guys are doing and really appreciate it. But a combination of all of these is, and frankly running a lab where we're trying to assess the different ecosystems, it's amazing that fragmentation is not going to go away. So each one has their own version. You look at something like DLNA, each company has now, which was started off as a standard, but now each company that we're looking at has their own version of DLNA. So whoever comes in next who tries to solve this problem for the industry is actually just creating yet another version. How, to us this is going to be a challenge.
So do you see that in the future we're going to see more standards around the cloud? That's going to start, so is the industry going to start looking, are you guys starting to collaborate on some of this stuff?
So at least, sorry, I'll just take that first. As far as Intel goes, the basic stuff that we're doing on client-aware and federation and automation, we are taking it very aggressively to standards bodies. It's probably a slower route to get the entire industry homogenized, but we strongly believe in that route and we're putting a lot of effort on it. So.
Samir, do you have a comment on the standards issues and
Actually,
barriers?
another comment on the barriers.
Okay.
In addition to kind of the technology barriers, I think two of the key ones that apply both on the consumer side and on the B2B side are security and privacy. And when you start to ask both individuals and businesses to start putting all sorts of critical data into the cloud, you have to start thinking about, what are the rules and regulations in different parts of the world in terms of what happens if there's a breach, what happens if that data is exposed. And then when it comes to personal information, I'm sure you've seen a plethora of healthcare startups that say, hey, give us all of your healthcare data and we'll put it in the cloud. Getting consumers to a comfort level that they feel, yeah, that's information is secure and private, and I'm okay with somebody else managing it in the cloud. I think there's still more work to be done to get both individuals and organizations over that hurdle to feel good about all types of information being stored in the cloud.
I'll actually pile on to what Samir just said and take it back to the standards point, which I would add, if you're going to put all your data in the cloud, the next thing we need is some kind of standards for interoperability or moving, right? I no longer want to use Google Docs, I want to use X Docs, and how do I get my content over there? I think that's something we'll see in the next few years, because it's going to start to be a problem.
Yeah, the operators actually, big announcement tonight from all the operators, there is interoperability. You can make a phone call from your Verizon phone to an AT&T
Actually, the operators have really done, the operators have been spending a lot of time on both fragmentation and interoperability stuff from there's a group called the Wholesale Application Community, WCA, the WAC, and they've done a tremendous job in terms of organizing folks around, okay, on the client side, HTML5, we believe HTML5 is the way to go for the client. We want to be able to have access to network services within an HTML5 client. What does that mean? You also want to have access to device services. Then on the other side of it, they've taken APIs, so you take things like the billing service, right? And they've said, we're going to standardize the billing API so that no matter whose network you use as a developer, the API interface looks exactly the same across Verizon or an AT&T or a Telefonica, right? And that's a huge step. Getting the operators to agree to do that kind of stuff for a handful of those APIs and hopefully expand it is a great way to get standards going. So
yeah. So, Karun, do you want to end the panel with some comments on what Microsoft's view of standards are? I'm just baiting you on this one, so I suppose you would like on this.
I don't know if I can speak for Microsoft. I want to be able to go to work back tomorrow morning. I'll speak.
Just see the support standards.
We play nice with the industry. No, I guess to the point of just to go back to the earlier point about interoperability, I think you'll see two things happening. On the one hand, you'll see formal standards being established by big players coming together trying to decide on standards, and then you'll see sort of a grassroots effort to produce interoperability. In fact, I'm seeing companies that are developing technologies that will let you move workloads between clouds, so do cloud bursting across heterogeneous clouds. And they're just building it, and it may just end up being a de facto standard. So yeah, I don't think that's there's no simple answer to it, and usually a lot of standards come out of de facto standards that get formalized and then approved.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So we're dead on 8 o'clock, which is, so basically what's going to happen now is we just want to give the panelists about 5 minutes to grab some water, and then we're going to come back straight with your question, and I'll start with you, because I know you're just dying, so just stay there. Okay. But let's give the panelists 5 minutes just to grab some water, just to get their throats back, and then we'll do it for the rest of the evening for questions. Okay? Great.
They don't want to pay, and where is the revenue coming?
I think you said it will start from the consumer. I don't think it will stop there, but it will broaden. But yeah,
So, Jamie, do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Then?
I mean, we at Box give away all of our mobile applications for free. All our mobile apps are free. But you pay for the Box service on the back end, right? So you
You're an enterprise service provider, not
but I mean, here's the reason, and here's the reason that as Hugh was alluding, that as soon as the freemium or in-application purchasing was turned on, all the developers turned to that. And it's the reason it's going to be the model is because if you charge for the application, you get $10 once and you're done, right? And we have partners who sell those types of applications, and they're struggling because when you have a business model like Box's, you sell the service at $10 a month, and you can imagine it's, that's $10 every month, on and on and on. So it's just a better business model. I mean, given the choice to sell an individual transaction or a subscription model, subscription wins, and so that's clearly anyone who can justify a subscription model is going to do so.
Just to quickly add to that, so for those of you that are kind of, go to startup events in the Valley, you've probably heard about Evernote. And Evernote is an example of a very successful freemium business model where you start out free, the service is free, but as more and more of your life starts to go into Evernote, the service becomes indispensable. And at some point, you see the value in saying, I'm going to start paying for this because it's so critical for me in terms of having all of this information available and accessible. So that's one example of a very successful consumer freemium business model.
Which I may add is a BizSpark one company.
Oh, wow.
You can look at another model, right? So how many of you use Angry Birds? How many people have played Angry Birds? Okay, how many of you have used the Eagle, Mighty Eagle? None of you have used the Mighty Eagle? I can't. Right? So Angry Birds is an app, you download it, it's free, right? You're in the game, you get frustrated with the level, so you buy the Eagle and you pay, your buck, right? But Angry Birds is looking to do more things, right? They want to stream video. They're going to turn into more of a media and multiplayer game company. So there's going to be more things that happen around in-app and in-app purchases. Think of World of Warcraft, but for Angry Birds, right? If you could. So you're going to be doing in-app purchases and virtual goods and things like that, which is where the money will come from. So one of the things that Angry Birds has been doing is talking to service providers about saying, look, instead of, I want people to use my game, right? So can you, or I want them to watch the video, I want to make money off of that. I'm going to show you I can make money, and once I can, will you rev share with me and zero rate the application so you don't charge the user for data, right? So instead of charging you for a data plan, I'd rather rev share because you're going to actually get more money off the rev share than you are off the data plan, right? So those are the types of business models and changes that you're seeing. It's going to take a while for everybody to kind of get there, but that's the way that it's going. So it's not about the app purchase, it's about the activity in the app.
Okay. Another question?
That let's not underestimate the enterprise market. I do think the panel seriously thought, mentioned that it starts from the consumer market. I think a lot of us believe that. But being Intel and having served the Fortune 500 companies, and I've personally been in meetings with all of these companies where they're looking at what part or what subset of their apps and data storage can they move to the cloud. Once this trend takes off for the next 2 to 5 years, literally that's why we launched a 2015 vision. It seems very far-fetched, but given where our main customers, which are the enterprises whom we service most, are going towards, you will see a big uptick. I think that is, in my mind, that is a big part of that chart there. So let's not underestimate that at all.
So additional?
Yeah, we're not going to underestimate, you're right. It starts with the consumer, moves that, and look at the Salesforce.com app store. We'll just say it's less successful than most of the consumer app stores. But it'll reinvent itself and take a lot of that consumer
Yeah.
learning,
Yeah.
and enterprise apps will be much better.
Do you wanted to ask a question? Again, speak right into the mic, please.
So first, just really quick a comment. I always go back to this old adage, which is there's a time and place for everything, in that there is a time for I want to pay for it one time. I sit on the side where I have to buy a lot of things, and so sometimes there's things that make sense. I want to buy it just one time. I don't have to be paying somebody monthly. So you have to think about the customer, so know the customer. Like a subscription model, I've done subscription models. I've done like just about anything in apps, you name it. And I can tell you there's a time for subscription, there's a time for a one-time, et cetera, et cetera. But the big question I have is around the billing area, especially in the carrier space, and where that's going, because the way I've seen it is that the ecosystem has been held back because of the carrier billing system. It's only because Apple really kind of broke that barrier down that it's accelerated. In Japan, we did billions and billions on apps and stuff on feature phones for a long time. And going back to interoperability, really quick, it's gotten way easier for anyone who's been in the mobile space for a long time. You could say like it's way easier than it was 5 years ago. There's a lot less platforms to develop for, and it's much easier than ever. But the carrier space, where do we see the billing getting easier? And some of these things, how do you see billing not only from the carrier side, but in terms of these little transactions that you guys are mentioning as you're trying to monetize these little things across the networks? How are people doing that? Where are you guys seeing people securing that transaction? Because that seems like a big challenge as well.
So Hugh, this sounds like your question. There's the answer.
Take away the 35% overhead.
Here's what we can talk about. And I think Laura hit a couple of really good points on that. The Verizon's had so carrier billing and in-app billing are different. The carrier billing is buying stuff, put it on your carrier bill. All right, and that's actually got a huge, if you can do that, people will actually buy more stuff because they trust Verizon, they're going to get the bill, and it just is convenient. And so there's a big upsell for that. So I think a lot of people want carrier billing in lots of the 4 or 5 or 6 different billing scenarios. I think Sprint has it today on Google, on the Android store. WAC is standardizing that. Verizon's on the board of WAC, so there's trials going on. And so I think my comment earlier is I would expect a somewhat standards approach for lots of the operators in the world to offer carrier billing in-app or out of app. Now, each operator is going to have a lot of different rules. So for instance, in our carrier billing product today, with a company in Denal called Build a Mobile, we have a $25 a month limit. Vodafone has a $25 transaction limit because they just launched with Google. So every operator is going to have some different rules of engagement like that. And it's going to be up to the developer who has the SDKs inside of the Android SDK kit to integrate with the operators. And then there's a lot of complexity that WAC is trying to address to have each operator's sort of personality for how to do carrier billing. But suffice to say, I think within a year, 2 years, you'll be able to charge most digital and
AT&T's still not there.
I didn't say it. But it's a very, very tough problem. But certainly Amazon helps a lot because they have their issues. My son is a developer in the Valley. They're all headed, the whole company, small company, headed to Atlanta for a wedding. They all had their laptops on the plane, Wi-Fi connected, rebuilding their instance when AWS went down.